He welcomed an alien into his home. Her true power left him speechless. It was the kind of morning that smelled like wet bark and stubborn fog, when the sun tried its best to rise but couldn't. Quite convinced the clouds to move, Joran had already cursed the sky twice before. Breakfast, his boots sank into the mud with a slurp like the forest was chewing. On him in one hand, he carried a wicker basket lined with moss in the other, a crooked walking stick that had once been straight until a goat named Fennel decided otherwise. The forest was an old one, older than stories, older than maps. Trees twisted into each other like gossiping elders, and birds only sang if you weren't listening. Joran didn't like coming here, not because he was afraid, but because the trees looked like they had opinions. Still, it was mushroom season, and the village healer claimed if she didn't get her red cap soon, someone's intestines would mutiny. Joran didn't ask questions, he rarely did. That was his gift to the world, blessed uncomplicated silence. He found the first batch near a fallen log, squatting beside it with a practiced eye. A few red caps peeked from the moss, their tops glistening with dew like little blood stains. He muttered, "Hello, fungus," and plucked them carefully. His fingers were calloused and quick. He was humming a half-tune about cabbage when he saw the boots. They were sticking out from behind a thick root, mismatched, scuffed, and far too clean for someone who'd walked through these woods. Attached to them was a pair of legs, long, lean, and entirely still. Joran blinked. Well, that's new. He rounded the root slowly, cautiously, like he was approaching a sleeping bear or a particularly judgmental ant. And there she was, a woman, unconscious, sprawled awkwardly across the moss. Her hair was tangled with leaves, and her clothing, if you could call it that, looked like someone had forged armor from midnight. Faint glowing lines pulsed along the seams like circuitry woven into fabric. Her face was sharp, almost too perfect, as if sculpted by someone who'd seen humans. Described once and decided to improve the concept, but it was the ears that stopped him. Long, pointed, delicate, not elf long, no sleek, elegant things that twitched once as he stared. Forest. Which, he asked aloud, or fashion victim? She didn't answer. Her chest rose and fell slowly, evenly. She was breathing alive, and then he saw the blood, not red but silver blue, trailing from a gash near her shoulder. It shimmered in the light like oil in starlight. "Oh, lovely," Joran muttered. "Bleeding glitter, that's going to ruin the moss." He knelt beside her and hesitated. This wasn't the kind of situation he was trained for, not that he was trained for much. He grew turnips and occasionally fought raccoons for ownership of his compost heap, but he wasn't about to leave her here, not with nightfall approaching and the forest full of things that liked their food. "Quiet, right," he said, as if someone had asked. "Let's get you out of here." Mysterious forest fashion alien. He hoisted her over his shoulder, groaning. She was surprisingly light, but the armor made disturbing creaking noises, and once her fingers twitched near his face, which nearly made him drop her. He decided to believe it was just a reflex, definitely not a death grip waiting to happen back. In his cottage, stone walls, slanted roof, and a fireplace that wheezed when it worked. He laid her on his old straw bed. She looked even more alien in the flickering firelight. Her skin was cool to the touch, faintly luminescent like moonlight trapped under skin. He frowned, then covered her with a wool blanket, and threw another log on the fire. He sat down heavily on the stool beside her and muttered, "You better not explode. I just fixed that roof last week." She didn't explode. Instead, she groaned a soft, pained sound that sounded more annoyed than injured. Her eyes fluttered open, not human eyes, irises like twin novas, deep and shifting, the kind of eyes that looked like they'd seen entire planets burn and then had tea afterward. She stared at him. He stared back. After a long pause, he said, "Welcome to the world of the conscious. You're in my bed, but not in a weird way." She blinked once. Her voice, when it came, was like low music distorted through a damaged speaker. "What system is this?" Jordan scratched his head. "System? My house runs mostly on stubbornness and leftover firewood, if that's what you mean." She tried to sit up and hissed in pain, clutching her side. He stood and gently pushed her back. Hey, no heroic movements. You've got a shoulder wound." And possibly a concussion, and also you're glowing. Should I be worried about radiation? She gave him a look not hostile, just deeply confused. What are you, local idiot? He said cheerfully. Name's Joran. I grow things and insult geese for sport. You. She hesitated, her mouth opened then closed. After a long moment she said, call me Vra. He nodded. Slowly, all right Vera, any dietary restrictions I should know about? Are you allergic to gravity? No answer. She was already asleep again. Joran sighed and went to check on the stew. He stirred it thoughtfully then muttered, if I wake up tomorrow and my goat's speaking in tongues, I'm blaming you. Outside the wind whispered through the trees. High above in the night sky beyond the clouds satellites blinked and turned. Something distant had noticed the spark of power igniting once more on a small forgotten world. Signals were dispatched. Ships began to pivot, but inside the cottage Joran tasted his stew, winced, and added, more salt. Bet aliens don't have to eat this stuff, he muttered. Vra half conscious replied without opening her eyes, you'd be surprised. Jor dropped the spoon. Great, she hears everything. That's just wonderful. The next morning began with a chicken-related crisis. Joran burst through the front door clutching an egg with both reverence and fury. Explain this, he demanded, holding it aloft like a relic from an ancient temple. One of them laid a cube. Vera sat at the edge of the straw bed, propped up against a stack of blankets and a slightly bent pillow. Her shoulder was bandaged and her long ears twitched every few seconds, either in pain or irritation. It was hard to tell which. She watched the egg with the same calm scrutiny she might give a collapsing star. Perhaps your poultry have evolved. I knew it, Joran muttered, turning the cube-shaped egg in his fingers. It's the radiation, or you brought alien geometry with you. I didn't bring geometry, she replied flatly, then paused. Although my med armor might emit a slight spatial disruption field in low-tech environments. Joran stared at her. I'm just going to pretend I understood none of that and blame the rooster, he said, placing the egg gently on the table like it might explode into calculus. Vera didn't smile, but there was a flicker of amusement in her gaze. She shifted, carefully testing the strength in her limbs. The recovery had been fast too. Fast by human standards, but still not fast enough for her liking. Her body trained to leap through gravity wells and endure G-forces that turned most beings into soup, now trembled when she reached for a ladle. Joran, to his credit, kept his commentary to a minimum unless it involved stew. Goat's sore furniture placement. That morning he made porridge. It was a tragic affair, slightly burnt and aggressively beige. He placed a bowl in front of her and sat opposite, hands clasped like he was bracing for feedback. Vera took a spoonful, chewed, swallowed, stared. Well, he asked, eyebrows lifted. It's resilient, she said in a tone that was not quite insulting, but certainly not a compliment. I'll take that. He grinned. A moment passed and then she said, you haven't asked. Jor glanced up, asked what, who I am, what I'm doing here, why I bleed silver and dream in 6 dimensions. He shrugged. I figured you tell me when you're ready, or when I accidentally step on a butt and turn into vapor. Your species is more trusting than I expected. No, Jor replied, just tired and slightly curious, and maybe a little charmed by the whole glowing, wounded space warrior woman thing. Vera blinked, then slowly she said, you're not afraid of me. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. You showed up half dead, muttering in a language that sounded like someone fighting a toaster. You've got ears like a bard's fevered dream, and armor that buzzes when I light the stove. If you wanted me dead, I think the chicken coop would already be a smoking crater. I don't vaporize chickens now. That's a quote. Her lips twitched almost. A smile almost outside wind brushed through the trees. Vera's gaze turned toward the window. Her fingers curled reflexively, as if searching for a weapon that wasn't there somewhere far beyond. This world signals still pulsed, data packets skipping across wormhole relays. Encrypted in a language most civilizations had forgotten. Someone would be coming. She could feel it in her blood, in the subtle hum of her neural implants still buried deep in her spine. Her ship was lost, her beacon shattered, but they'd track her. They always did. She couldn't stay, and yet Joran returned from washing the dishes with a grin and a towel on his shoulder. So if you're some kind of galactic warlord, or I don't know, a fugitive princess, does that mean you can rebuild the chicken coop? With lasers, she tilted her head. You assume I have lasers. I hope you have lasers, because I'm about one goat short of declaring civil war on the north fence. Vera looked at the ceiling. In my culture, humor is considered a secondary defense mechanism right after plasma grenades. Joran beamed. Well, lucky for you, I'm fluent in sarcasm and fence repairs. You teach me to dodge death rays. I'll teach you how to milk a goat without losing a finger. The trade sounded almost fair. Almost. She let the silence settle before saying, I was part of a division called the Endarian Blades Special Reconnaissance High Infiltration Galactic Conflict Resolution. Joran raised an eyebrow. Conflict resolution, with rail guns. Ah, the peaceful kind. She looked down at her hands, the scars. There were old but deep. I failed a mission. Someone betrayed us. My squad was lost. I escaped with the quantum shard. What's a quantum shard? Something no one should have, she said simply. Great, well, just don't leave it near the chickens. They get weird around things that hum. Vera finally let the smile happen. It was brief, fragile, but real. Later that afternoon, Joran took her outside. She moved slowly, still leaning on a carved walking stick. He insisted was lucky. The air was fresh, the sky a pale blur of blue and gray. Birds argued in the trees. The wind carried the scent of damp wood and stubborn roots. They stood side by side, looking over a stretch of field still half frozen from late winter. Somewhere in the distance, a goat screamed in indignation. I don't understand this place, she said softly. Good, neither do I. You'll fit right in. She glanced sideways at him. You're strange. I get that a lot. I'm not sure you understand how dangerous this all is. I'm not sure you understand how hard it is to dig an irrigation trench with a shovel made of regret and rust. And somehow in the quiet between their words, something settled. Not peace, not yet, but a fragile thread of understanding woven with jokes and porridge and the shared absurdity of existence. The stars would come for her, but for now the chickens clucked. The stew boiled, and Joran grinned like a man who had absolutely no idea what he'd got himself into. And Vira, the most dangerous woman in the galaxy, let herself breathe just a little. It rained for 2 days straight after that, not a gentle poetic drizzle, but a thundering sideways roof rattling downpour that made even the frogs consider renting boats. Joran spent most of the time grumbling about leaks that seemed to defy physics. Water dripping upward, somehow finding its way into sealed barrels, and a mysterious puddle that appeared under his pillow twice. He was beginning to suspect the house had developed a sense of humor. Vera, on the other hand, didn't mind the rain. She sat near the hearth, wrapped in a patched cloak, her armor sealed away in a chest beneath the bed. She watched the flames as if they whispered something only she could hear. Eyes half lidded, her ears twitching faintly with each thunderclap. Joran brought her tea, his fourth attempt at brewing something that didn't taste like boiled moss, and placed it beside her with all the ceremony of a knight presenting a royal goblet. There, he said proudly, locally foraged, might heal you, might kill you. 50-50. She took a sip, paused, and said, tastes like bark. Good, that means it's working. She didn't smile, but the corner of her lip quirked upward for a brief second. Jor called it a victory. That evening, when the wind finally calmed and the sound of dripping took over for the orchestra of thunder, she asked, why do you stay here in this place? He looked up from the dented pot he was trying to scrub clean with a bit of charcoal and raw determination. You mean the village, this world, it's quiet, forgotten, primitive. Joran leaned back, hands on his hips. Some people would call that peace, or maybe stubbornness. Also, my goat is here. She bites strangers. Miss Vera's brow furrowed. You're not curious about the wider galaxy? Oh, I'm curious. I just prefer my curiosity to stay hypothetical, like do stars smell, or can a person actually explode from eating too much cheese? Things like that. Vera shook her head in mild disbelief. You're unlike any human I've met. I'll take that as a compliment, but for the record, the humans you've met, did they also serve you mushroom stew with ominous undertones? Number, they usually tried to shoot me. Then I'm already ahead, he said, grinning. Later, while Joran wrestled with a broken shutter, Vera stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The world was slick with reflections, trees bending over puddles like they were staring into another universe. The air held the kind of silence that only came after a storm. A soft, waiting quiet. She scanned the horizon instinctively, eyes adjusting her Enhanced vision swept across the tree, filtering for energy signatures, heat traces, and ion disturbances. Nothing yet. But the silence was suspicious. Something in the atmosphere tickled the back of her mind, a faint distortion, a rhythm. That didn't belong. Joran peeked around the door. You doing that, staring into the void thing again? I heard something. He raised an eyebrow. Well, unless it was shouting about taxes, it's probably just one of the forest cats or the wind or my neighbor. You have a neighbor. Used to. He tried to build a hot tub using fermented tree sap and a lightning rod. Haven't seen him since. Vera turned back to the trees, still frowning. The sound hadn't come again. No confirmation, but her instinct screamed louder than any sensor. She was being watched, tracked. Maybe the universe didn't let fugitives rest for long. No matter how many cups of bark tea they were served that night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, her senses alert, hands resting on the hilt of a tool Jor thought was a metal whisk. In truth, it was a compact plasma weapon, disguised cleverly to look like kitchen, where a little invention of hers from a long-forgotten siege on the moon of Vexura. Sometimes the best place to hide power was right next to the spoons. Joran snored like a collapsing star, peaceful, unaware, but the stars weren't still far above, in orbit just beyond the reach of primitive satellites. A ship floated, sleek, black, and silent. Its hull bore no insignia, no lights. It was built for one thing: hunting. Inside, a being reclined in a command chair, watching a glowing map that pulsed with faint life signals. A blinking dot had returned. We found her, the hunter murmured, voice like rust scraping metal, prepared descent back on the ground, unaware of the shadow curling through the clouds above them. Joran awoke in the morning to find his stew pot missing. Vera, he called, groggy. Did you repurpose my stew pot into a hyperspace cannon or something from the edge of the cottage? She replied without turning. I needed it to amplify a dampening field. Your cookware is surprisingly conductive. He stared at her. You turn my pot into a force field. Temporarily. Will it still hold soup? It will hold most things, including small meteorites. Joran rubbed his eyes. You're ruining my ability to complain, you know that. But even as he grumbled, Vera was focused. Her wounds had mostly healed, her reflexes had returned, and now her mind moved swiftly through possibilities. She had 20 hours at most before a contact ship made landfall, maybe less if they'd hired mercenaries. She'd seen what the galaxy did to those who carried knowledge like hers, knowledge meant to be buried. And then there was Joran, utterly unaware, completely out of his depth, yet he had offered her shelter without question, fed her, listened to her, called her strange names like forest ninja and space porcupine depending on her mood. She sighed. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. When Jor walked out later with a small bowl of berries and nuts, he handed it to her with his usual crooked smile. Figured you might like a snack that doesn't come with existential dread. She took it. Thank you. You're welcome, Vera. A soup shield made an eye. Regret telling you anything. You'll regret it more when I knit you a sweater with that title on it. As the sun broke through the thinning clouds, they stood there side by side, a villager with dirt on his hands and a warrior with secrets that could unmake worlds. Neither of them noticed the faint shimmer in the sky, not yet, but it was coming. Joran was not a man accustomed to waking up with a plasma rifle aimed at his nose. In his defense, there were very few guides on what to do in such a situation. His instincts, such as they were, suggested something between play dead and offer breakfast. Instead, he blinked at the unfamiliar figure standing in the middle of his cottage, helmeted, armored, tall as the ceiling, aloud, and said the first thing that came to his mind, if you're here to collect taxes, I should warn you my goat bites." The bounty hunter tilted their head, clearly confused, not by the mention of a goat but by Joran's calm, or maybe by his sleep hair which defied gravity in 3 directions. Vera appeared a second later, barefoot and silent, stepping between them so fast Joran wasn't sure she'd touch the floor at all. "Drop it," she said to the intruder, her voice colder than the wind after harvest. The bounty hunter hesitated, and that's when Joran realized just how wrong his morning was going, because Vera's posture had shifted. Shoulders squared, spine rigid, one hand behind her back, and her ears, those elegant, long, slightly curved ears, were angled in a way that meant someone was going to regret their decisions. The Plasma rifle dropped an inch enough for Vera to move in a blur. She seized the barrel, twisted, and brought the butt of the weapon up under the hunter's helmet. A mechanical crunch echoed in the cottage. The intruder slumped to the floor, groaning. Joran stared. Wow. Remind me never to borrow your tea without asking. Vera didn't answer. She crouched beside the fallen bounty hunter, pried off the helmet, and examined the face beneath. Not human mottled skin, pupilless eyes, a thin slit of a mouth. Mercenary, not military. She knew the type. Hired by whoever could pay and willing to chase quarry through nebulous storms and planetary quarantines. He came alone, Joran asked. Number scouts never do. Vera stood and scanned the sky. Through the window, they'll test the perimeter first. Look for signs of life. Scan for me. Can they find you? Not if I keep moving. He blinked. Wait, are you leaving? There was a silence, a heavy one. I can't stay here, she said, and though her voice was steady, there was something else in it. Regret, maybe. Disappointment, aimed squarely at the universe. But they'll come here anyway, Jordan said slowly. If they're after you, and they tracked you this far, they'll think I'm part of it. Ver's eyes flicked to his, sharp and unreadable. I didn't mean to involve you, I know. He rubbed the back of his neck. But you did, and now I'm involved, so you might as well stay long enough to tell me why someone just kicked my door in like it owed them money. Vera hesitated. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, something mechanical hummed. I wasn't just a soldier, she said at last. I was part of the Obsidian Crown. Joran frowned. That sounds like a villainous baking guild. It was a secret order, she continued, ignoring him. We trained beyond the limits of flesh-enhanced reflexes. Neural modifications. Our minds were connected through a silent net. Each of us carried knowledge from hundreds of years of combat tactics, histories, technology lost to time, and now you're here in my cottage eating stew and confusing my goat. They hunted us down, she said quietly, one by one. I'm the last. Jiren was quiet for a moment, digesting that. And then I always suspected I was the most boring person in the galaxy. This confirms it. Vera gave him a sideways look. You aren't boring. I literally plant potatoes and lose arguments to small rodents. You're peaceful. She frowned slightly as if the word was unfamiliar on her tongue. You don't treat me like a weapon. I didn't know you were one. She cracked a smile. Then barely, but it was there. The rest of the day passed in fits of preparation. Vera dismantled the bounty hunter's gear, converting his comm link into a short-range jammer and his helmet into a makeshift sensor grid. She used Jor's cooking pots again to amplify a deflection field around the perimeter. Jor helped where he could, mostly by offering unsolicited advice. Are you sure that wire goes there? Because last time I tried wiring something like that, the stove exploded. Was that when you tried to make coffee with a lightning crystal? In my defense, the label did say energizing by nightfall. The sensors hummed faintly, tuned to frequencies that no creature of Earth had ever dreamed of. The stars above blinked cold and distant, but Vera's gaze was sharp. Train not on the sky, but on the spaces between. They'll come at dawn, she said. Do you want me to leave? No. Joran looked at her in surprise. That's unexpected and kind of nice. You'll be safer here. Again, that's not how danger works. Vera didn't reply, but she handed him something, a small shimmering disc, the size of a coin. What is it? He asked. A memory seal. If I fall, crush it. It will trigger a data cascade and destroy what I know. Joran looked down at the disc, then up at her. No offense, but I really don't want to carry your self-destruct button around. It's not for you, it's for the galaxy. Great, no pressure. He sat beside her as night crept across the hills. The forest sang with nocturnal sounds, soft rustles, distant calls, the occasional cough from a goat with questionable timing. Vera sat still, eyes closed, not asleep, but deeply focused. Do you ever miss it? Joran asked. She opened one eye. Miss what? All of it. The fighting, the stars, the order. She considered. I miss the clarity, the sense of purpose. Joran nodded. I miss soup that doesn't come with a side of plasma grenades. She snorted softly. You're ridiculous and you're terrifying. We balance each other out. When dawn crept over the edge of the world, it found them both awake, quiet and ready, and far above them, something darker than the clouds began to fall. Joran had never considered that his quaint little hillside might one day become the site of an interstellar standoff, but then again he'd also never expected to host an alien warrior with long ears and a fondness for tea. Life, he was learning, had a way of escalating quickly when plasma weapons were involved. The morning sky above the cottage shifted unnaturally, clouds parting not by wind, but by force. A low mechanical hum trembled in the air. It wasn't thunder, though it rumbled like it. Vera stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes locked on the descending shape, a sleek vessel, black as vacuum, its surface rippling with refracted light. That, Joran said, from where he crouched behind a barrel of pickled turnips, is not a bird. It's a Talith-class hunter drone. Vera replied, her voice unreadable. Unmanned scans for heat signatures and molecular anomalies. If it doesn't find me, it'll torch the land to make sure. Joran blinked. Wow, efficient and rude. Vera didn't smile, her gaze remained fixed. She tapped a small device strapped to her wrist, and a translucent interface bloomed into view, its alien script scrolling too fast for Joran's eyes to track. I've set a decoy note in the forest, she said. It will emit a false trail, heat, pheromones, even breath patterns. I didn't realize you'd collected my breath patterns. I didn't, she said evenly. I used the goats. There was a long silence, then Joran groaned. You made the drone think I'm the goat, didn't you? Technically the goat is you. He buried his face in his hands. This is going to look fantastic on my tombstone. The drone passed low, casting a shimmering light across the treetops. As it moved toward the decoy, the deflection field around the cottage held, disrupting its scans just enough. After a few minutes of searching and no direct engagement, it veered off and disappeared. Beyond the ridge, Vera waited several long breaths before lowering her guard. That was just the scout, she said. The others will be here soon. Oh, splendid. Joran muttered, more visitors. Should I set the table? She turned to him, seriousness flickering in her expression. They won't talk, they'll shoot first, then disintegrate the remains. That's discourteous, they're not here to be polite. She moved past him and into the cottage, grabbing what little gear she'd salvaged, armor, plating, a repulsor dagger, a sleek foldable rifle with a barrel that shimmered faintly in infrared. Joran watched her as she moved, each gesture fluid and practiced like a dance honed across years. Is there any chance, he asked, that you're overestimating the danger and underestimating my turnips? She raised an eyebrow. They're very tough, he insisted, aged to perfection. You could probably knock someone out with one. I'll keep that in mind. She glanced at him again, a little longer this time, and then did something that startled him more than any alien ship had that morning. She handed him a stun baton. Hold this, she said. Jor took it, blinking. Why do I feel like this is the beginning of a very bad decision? Because it is. Before he could argue, a warning chime echoed from her wrist. The sound was sharp, urgent. Another ship was coming, this one larger. He could hear it now, even before it crested the hills. The hum had turned into a roar. He stepped outside just as the transport descended into view. It was nothing like the scout drone. This one was armored, angular, bristling with weapon pods and energy cannons. It hovered for only a moment before landing with seismic force flattening half of his cabbage patch. I just tilled that, he said somewhat mournfully. The hatch hissed open. Out stepped 6 figures, tall, armored in dull gray suits that shimmered with atmospheric shielding. Their helmets resembled insect carapaces, dark and smooth. One of them raised a weapon that looked suspiciously like it could erase half the village. Vera stepped into the open, calm and unflinching. You're trespassing, she said. The lead bounty hunter tilted its head. Its voice came out in mechanical tones, amplified and hollow. We're here for the traitor. Step aside, civilian. I'm not a civilian. That was rhetorical. Joran, who had taken shelter behind a barrel again, whispered, this feels like the wrong time to point out how bad they are at diplomacy. The lead hunter raised his weapon. Vera didn't hesitate. A flick of her wrist, and her repulsor dagger flared into existence. She surged forward, becoming a blur of motion, ducking under plasma fire, deflecting a bolt with her forearm shield, twisting around one enemy, and Disabling his exo-suit with a precise strike to the spine relay, Jor peeked out. Again just in time to see another mercenary crash into his porch, snapping the railing that's coming out of. Your repairs. The battle was over almost as fast as it began. Smoke curled from the shattered weapons, and 4 of the hunters were unconscious on the ground. One was missing a helmet. The 6th had bolted into the woods. The moment things went sideways, Vera stood in the middle of the wreckage, breathing steady. No injuries he could see. She turned to him. Are you okay? He held up the stun baton, which he hadn't used once. Oh yes, tremendous, help me, I think I scared one of them by tripping over a watering can. You didn't run. That's something I was considering it, but the goat blocked the door. She gave a faint smile, then her gaze turned toward the tree where the last mercenary had fled. He'll report back. Is that bad? Jor followed her gaze, heart still thudding in his chest. So what now? She said. We prepare for the one who sent them. And who is that exactly? She hesitated. The warden of Virax, a warlord collector of rare warriors. He hunts what he cannot control. Let me guess, you told him? No, I told him to swallow a black hole. Well, Gyron said, patting the remaining barrel. Good thing I've got more turnips. The wind carried the scorched scent of plasma and broken earth, but the village had never been so quiet, not even during the harvest moon festival when most people were too busy snoring off the cider. Now only silence stretched across the hills. Uneasy waiting, Jor stood with a bent rake in his hands, watching the horizon as if something might crawl out of it any moment. He was beginning to feel like a scarecrow in a war zone. Vera was pacing in front of the cottage, armored up again. Her movements were fluid and deliberate, but there was a tension beneath her surface, like a coiled starship reactor on the verge of firing. Her long ears twitched occasionally, reacting to sounds far beyond Jor's ability to hear. He tried to lighten the mood. You know, I was thinking of hanging a welcome sign. Greetings, please wipe your boots and don't vaporize the farmer. Put that on a satellite, she muttered. Maybe it'll stop the next fleet. I'll need more wood and paint and maybe a missile defense system. She gave him a brief glance, something almost resembling a smile. You're adapting quickly. It's that or scream into a bucket, he said, which I also tried. Startled the chickens. He leaned on the rake, watching her work. She'd repurposed some old farming tools, reconfigured his windmill into a kinetic shield projector, planted sensor rods along the fence that blinked with quiet alien light, and even rewired his generator to boost her energy cells. Honestly, it was starting to look less like a cottage and more like a very confused starbase. Why him? He asked suddenly. Vera paused, turning toward him. The warlord, Jor clarified. Why does this collector of warriors want you so badly? She hesitated, then voice quiet, she replied, because I humiliated him once. Is this the galactic version of holding a grudge? He sent his best champion to take my sector. I beat him with a power cell and a spoon, a very sturdy one. Joran blinked. Okay, now I have to see that flashback someday. I was young, reckless. Her expression turned grim. He never forgot. He wants me either as a trophy or removed from the board. Entirely. Bit dramatic, Joran muttered. Vera returned to her scans, tapping the wrist console. He's deploying something large. Atmospheric distortion suggests a carrier class vessel. That's overkill. You did say he was insecure or he's afraid. That's comforting. Just then a flicker of static buzzed through the air. The console on her wrist sparked, then steadied. A low mechanical voice echoed across the valley, modulated, slow and far too calm. Vera Ellerin of the Velari Blades, you are ordered to surrender. This planet is not shielded. Your escape is statistically impossible. Joran looked up at the sky. Oh good, he does monologues. That's always a good sign. The voice continued. You have 30 minutes before atmospheric cleansing begins. This is your only warning. Vera switched off the comms. He's bluffing. Joran stared at her. Bluffing about cleansing the atmosphere? He wants me. He won't destroy the planet unless I push him. Joran raised a hand. Not to nitpick, but what exactly counts as pushing him? Is blinking aggressively a threat? Where you're from? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to him, expression thoughtful. We could leave. Joran blinked. What, just hop onto your invisible escape pod and fly off? No pod. I'd use the beacon. I've hidden one beneath your turnip field. He looked toward the dirt patch aghast. That explains why my turnips taste faintly of batteries. The beacon can summon a Valith rescue unit, but it would expose them to a direct confrontation. The warlord might follow, so in trying to save you I doom your friends too. Essentially, there was a long, quiet pause. Joran stared at the rake in his hands, then out at the hills again. I'm not a warrior, Vera, he said. I barely qualify as a competent turnip grower, but you're here, you're standing in front of me, and I've seen the way you fight, the way you protect. He took a breath. So maybe I'm not running. She looked at him long and silent, as if seeing him for the first time. Her expression softened. That's foolish, extremely, and brave. He shrugged. Mostly foolish. Another ping from her console interrupted the moment. She frowned. The carrier just entered low orbit. He's deploying a ground team. Joran readied his rake. Right, well, let's show them how sharp farming tools can be. Vera handed him a more practical plasma staff. Let's not. The hum of descending crafts began again, closer this time, louder. One of the larger vessels breached the clouds, wings unfolding like a monstrous bird, casting a vast shadow over the cottage. Okay, Joran whispered. Now it's officially getting dramatic. They both stood at the edge of the field, side by side, watching the incoming threat. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and yet for the first time since she'd arrived, Vera looked steady, not just as a warrior, but as someone who had found a reason to stay. I used to think planets like this were weak, she said, voice low, too soft, too quiet, but I was wrong. Thanks, Joran muttered. We take our softness very seriously. She glanced at him, a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Next time I'll bring armor that fits you. He smirked. Next time, planning to stay a while? She didn't answer, but the way she stepped forward, ready to meet the warlord's soldiers, not with fear, but with quiet fire, told him everything. The wind kicked up, carrying with it the dust of the field and the promise of battle, and somewhere behind them the goat sneezed, because of course it did. Smoke curled in lazy spirals above the scorched earth, drifting through what was once Jor's peaceful cabbage patch. Now it resembled a craterized salad bowl. Scattered across the field were bits of Wartech fried drones, sparking exo suits, and one helmet impaled on a garden hoe like some bizarre flag of victory. Somewhere near the well, the goat was chewing calmly on a scorched alien banner, utterly unimpressed by the interstellar skirmish that had just unfolded. Joran sat on a stone, cradling a mug of lukewarm cider with both hands, because that's what you do when the galaxy nearly explodes in your backyard. His shirt was half burned, his boots were mismatched, and he had a minor concussion, but he was alive. That counted for something. Do all battles smell like burnt carrots? He asked Vera, standing a few feet away with her armor singed and her hair loose. Glanced at him as she calibrated her weapon's core. Only the victorious ones. I feel like that should go on a flag or a tavern sign. Burnt carrot where victories are toasted. She chuckled, a real laugh this time, not just the amused exhale she used when humoring him. That sound alone made the bruises feel worth it. The battle had ended quickly, all things considered. The warlord had descended with arrogance and firepower. Vera, however, had greeted him with precision, rage, and a repurposed windmill-mounted plasma cannon. Jor had helped in ways he could mostly by distracting a shock trooper with his best lost villager routine and tripping over his own rake into a pile of explosive charges. It wasn't exactly heroic, but it had been surprisingly effective, and now the invaders were gone. The warlord had fled, nursing his pride and likely swearing vengeance again, or Joran hoped. Therapy. Vera walked over, crouched beside him. You fought well, not just with a rake. I did, scream convincingly. You also distracted a heavily armed soldier by arguing about soil acidity. Joran lifted a finger. Hey, soil matters, just ask my cabbages. She looked at him for a moment, then reached into a pouch and handed him a small, smooth object. It pulsed gently in his palm, warm, alive with energy. What's this? He asked. A transponder key. It's connected to my people. If you ever need help, press it. He stared at the tiny Device then at her, that's a lot of trust you earned it, he cleared his throat. Unsure what to say, so what now you beam away in a glittery light and I go back to growing unusually aggressive carrots I could, she said, but I was thinking I might stay. His heart thudded like a faulty irrigation pump. Stay. I fought wars across 10 systems, led armies, toppled tyrants, insulted bureaucrats in 17 languages. She looked at the hills beyond the wreckage, but I've never fixed a roof in the rain or argued with a goat over breakfast or laughed while picking turnips, that is rare. Jordan blinked. You're telling me the most powerful warrior in the galaxy wants to retire on my cabbage farm? She smiled. I'm telling you the most tired warrior in the galaxy wants peace, and maybe, just maybe, a new kind of battle. He tilted his head against weeds, against loneliness. There was a silence between them, not heavy but full, the kind that stretched like warm light through the trays. The war was over, the smoke would fade, but something better was beginning. Fine, he said, pretending to grumble, but if you're staying, you're helping with the chickens. She nodded solemnly. Deal, but I get to name them, even the rooster, especially the rooster. They stood together then, watching the sun begin to rise over the battered hills. Vera had called down a small ship earlier to clear out the remaining Tekken bodies. It would leave no trace of the battle behind, at least nothing the villagers would notice. Speaking of villagers, Joran winced. You know the village council is going to ask questions, then we lie about the plasma craters. We say it was experimental scarecrow technology that might actually work. They stood for another moment until the goat wandered over, head-butted Vera in the shin, and trotted away with a very smug bleat. She rubbed her leg. I take it back, that goat is my next enemy. Joran laughed, tipping his mug in salute. Good luck, it's undefeated. The wind stirred the leaves, lifting the scent of morning dew over scorched soil. Life would return to normal, well, a new kind of normal one, with laser drills, occasional sky watching for returning warlords, and a legendary alien woman casually helping bake pies. Vera stretched armor plates, clicking softly, then pulled off a piece of her shoulder guard and handed it to him. A token, she said, to remember that sometimes sheltering a stranger can change the entire galaxy. He turned it over in his hands, lightweight, etched with symbols he couldn't read, but he understood the meaning well enough. You know, he said, when I found you in that forest, I thought you were just a lost traveler. I was, she said softly, but not anymore. And as they stood together in the wreckage of a battle that never should have touched a quiet village, the universe felt for once still. No alarms, no chases, just two lives improbably tangled, daring to begin again. Somewhere in the distance, the rooster let out a war cry. Vera grinned. He knows I'm staying. Joran raised his mug to new battles, to home, she replied, and the stars above watched in silence. Content for now, to let peace take root. The end.